So just to go through some of the logistics of the Sunshine Coast Trail. So we, left from Vancouver. We took the ferry from Horseshoe Bay to Langdale on the Sunshine Coast. We drove the 90 minutes to Earls Cove and then took the ferry to Sultry Bay and did the 30-minute drive to Powell River. In Powell River, we overnighted at a cheap motel called the Seaside. And then in the morning, we had arranged a coast taxi, actually, to meet us at the Powell Lake Marina Shingle Mill Pub. There's actually free parking there. The taxi picked the four of us up, drove us to Lund, about another 45 minutes, and that cost $65 for the four of us. In Lund, we then caught a water taxi from Lund Water Taxi. When that taxi depends on the tides. The nice thing about that taxi is when they drop you off at the northern terminus of the Sunshine Coast Trail, you can wear your hiking boots. They basically drop you off on a rock ledge, so your feet stay dry. You do need a BC Parks permit to stay at either Sarah Point or 3 kilometers away. There's a campsite called Feather Cove. Either one, you're going to need this fairly inexpensive permit. It's only about $20. Sarah Point's absolutely beautiful. 4 tent platforms, 400 meters further away, there's a cabin and some more tent platforms that's towards the end of the road, because it is possible, depending on the condition of the Sarah Point Road, to drive fairly close to Sarah Point. From Sarah Point, we walked to Wednesday Lake the next day. 3 kilometers long is Feather Cove, which is another beautiful campsite. Tent platforms, beautiful little rocky bay. You will often have to share that with ocean kayakers, whereas Sarah Point is not an ocean kayaking destination, so you have more chance of having that to yourself, as we did. So we walked the 12 kilometers the next day to Wednesday Lake. Good water there, pretty little lake, nice rocky point that sticks into the lake, and there's really one beautiful tent site on that rocky point. We were 2 tents, so we actually camped a little before Wednesday Lake at a very nice forest campsite with a pit toilet. The next day, you slog up to Manzanita Bluff, which is one of the high points of the trip. Absolutely beautiful. We would probably stay there next time. The downside is there's no water, so you'd have to hump the water all the way up from Wednesday Lake. You go off the other side of Manzanita Bluff, walk down through the forest, and you eventually come across Malaspina Road, one of the major roads you cross. And then we crossed that, and just beyond the road, we camped at Fern Gully Picnic Area. Not great water there, so we actually, some of the locals leave water at Malaspina Road where the trail crosses the road, so we actually went back and got some of that water. From Fern Gully, we then hiked the next day. We went past another high point called Gibraltar Point, quite spectacular views. And then we descended down into Appleton Canyon, another good campsite, nice pit toilet a ways away, but in the area. Good water and some breathtakingly cold swimming, but a nice place. From Appleton, we then walked to Little Sleamon Lake, which a campsite called Shwangala, and nice campsite. There's actually a dock, and there's really beautiful swimming in the lake, and good water, and pit toilet as usual. For the whole trip, we actually used a bear rope and hung our food. Some of the cabins have bear lockers, but we didn't stay at any of the cabins. We stayed at campsites in between the cabins. The last day we hiked from Little Sleamon up and over Scout Mountain and back down to Powell Lake Marina. From there, we retrieved our car and drove back into Powell River, and then spent another night at a cheap motel, this time called the Westview Motel. And then the following day, we retraced our steps on BC ferries back to Vancouver.